And to keep it lively, we're now joined by Katie Pavlich. Katie, of course, from townhall.com, the news editor there, and the author of the book Fast and Furious. Katie, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
So what's the latest here? It looks like we're going to have this universal background check bill brought to the floor of the Senate. And also, is Harry Reid going to stay true to his promise to Senator Feinstein and also bring the assault weapons ban amendment to the floor of the Senate? And if so, how is that going to shake down?
Well, I think so. I mean, he's kind of promised Dianne Feinstein that her bill is not dead, right? And you've seen that President Obama and Joe Biden are trying to round up votes for the assault weapons bill. But we've also seen that we're going to have another Stand with Rand moment, that it's going to be a Stand with Rand, a Stand with Ted Cruz moment, because they're vowing to filibuster any type of new gun control legislation that's brought to the floor, either standalone or as an amendment.
Wait, so does that include the background check?
It includes the background check, and the reason they're doing it, people might ask, well, what's the point, is because they're concerned about when the bill reaches the floor, what amendments could be added. For example, Dianne Feinstein's new assault weapons bill, which also contains limits on high-capacity magazines, might I add. So that's something that we're going to be looking at. But this is important to point out because Harry Reid has already been able to shield vulnerable Democrats from voting on this assault weapons ban bill, right, by not bringing it to the floor as a standalone bill. Now, you know, by filibustering this, it forces Harry Reid to come to the floor and say, okay, can you please stop? Or it forces him to allow it to continue, which would then halt a vote on the legislation. So it kind of puts Harry Reid in a tough spot, which I think is probably a good thing.
Well, and that's probably the strategy.
Well, that's the strategy,
here.
Yeah.
Well, and we talked about this. I mean, what vulnerable Democrats are dreading this moment, Katie Pavlich?
Well, we're looking at, obviously, Democrats who are in red states. So Minnesota, West Virginia, Joe Manchin is probably dreading this.
Well, but he's not up for re-election. I mean, we're really looking at 2014 here, so we're looking at Arkansas, Louisiana, North Carolina.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, Harry Reid is really kind of boxed himself in. Actually, let me pivot for a second and ask you, Michael Steele, what is Barack Obama to do here? I mean, he's really kind of throwing his own senators under the bus.
Well, I think that's part of the concern that the Senate Democrats have, and that, as we've seen in some other legislative battles in the past, that's exactly what the White House has done, is exposed their left flank, if you will, and put a number of members in jeopardy. And I think that when Reid is looking at this, and again, there should be no secret or surprise here where the Senate Democrats are. Harry Reid made it very clear at the beginning of this debate on the heels of Sandy Hook that any legislation that would look to reduce or constrict access that hunters and others would have to weapons would not go well in the Senate, and he's held true to that. And so I think, to Katie's point, he now finds himself in the unenviable position of having to either let this filibuster go on or bring this measure to the floor, which then creates a whole nother set of issues for him.
But, Katie, the White House and the Democrats in the Senate are looking at this poll that apparently shows something like 92% of Americans favor universal background checks. Is that, first of all, is that a real number? And secondly, do people really understand what universal background checks mean and what the dangers are with universal background checks?
Exactly. It's a real number in the sense of what they think it means, right? They think it's a background check on every single sale, and that's it. But when you actually dive into the type of legislation that's being brought to the floor here, it's a real problem. It not only eliminates the possibility of lots of gun safety training courses outside of a gun range. It turns people into felons. They say that, you know, this covers private transfers in terms of you can gift someone one of your guns. But the fact is that if I go, in the way that the legislation is written now, if you and I were to go out into the woods, Larry, and go hunting, if I lend you my gun, I am now a felon under this legislation. Also, if your weapons get stolen out of your home and you don't report them within 24 hours to the authorities, is the person who stole them in trouble? No. The person who owns those firearms is now a felon if they don't report them within 24 hours. And so that it's a really bad piece of legislation. It doesn't, you know, and we have to remember too that Joe Biden himself admitted that they don't have time to be prosecuting people who lie on their background check forms. Well, so what is the point of continuing to build this bureaucracy when they won't even enforce the laws already on the books?
Well, Katie, you raise an interesting point there, because this gun debate sounds a lot like the healthcare debate when Nancy Pelosi said, well, we need to pass the law before we know what's in it.
Yeah.
And here we are again on a measure that has fundamental constitutional ramifications to it. And you make the point that a lot of people think they know what it is, but in actuality they don't. What do you see as the importance of really expressing and explaining to people, to that 92% who support gun background checks, exactly what this bill entails and what it means to them, so that they fully understand what they're saying when they say yes to something like this?
Well, I think that we've heard the argument that the universal background check will turn into universal registration, which I think is a good one. However, I think a better argument to make is, look, this piece of legislation doesn't focus on criminals. It focuses on law-abiding citizens who happen to own firearms. And so you look at the details of this bill and you say, why are they focusing on, the dad who wants to take his son out and lend him his hunting rifle? I mean, that's the problem here. So just focusing on the fact that this does not do anything to target criminals. It simply targets people who already have their firearms in a very legal way.
So you restrict the gun owner who behaves themselves and abides the law, meanwhile leaving the criminal to roam free as possible, and then some time down the road, when there's a blow up or another Sandy Hook, God forbid, or something like that, you can further come back and constrict, having not really addressed the initial problem to begin with.
Well, I think pointing out Joe Biden's words and him saying that we don't have time to enforce the people who lie in their background check forms. Mm-hmm. So why are we passing more legislation that the federal government can't even keep up with when it comes to criminals already lying on their background check forms?
Yep.
And I think that's really just where you have to focus. This isn't about punishing criminals. This is about controlling and knowing what people have in their home.
But, Katie, the argument that we're hearing from the other side is that 40% of all gun acquisitions right now happen outside of the standardized background check laws that are already out there, and this is supposed to stop that gap. What is the response to that?
Well, first of all, that's a bad number that was taken before the first Clinton-era assault weapons ban. And it's based on the idea that people think that when you go to a gun show, that gun background checks just aren't being conducted, and it's absolutely not true. The only people who aren't conducting background checks through federally licensed firearms dealers at gun shows are people who are trading and selling collectible firearms, not AR-15 style rifles. And 98% of people who buy guns at gun shows are getting a background check, and when they're purchasing these types
All right, Katie,
of firearms.
We got to leave it there, but thank you for that, because that's the kind of information that we need to have, so when we engage with that crazy liberal in the cubicle next to us at the office, we'll be able to push back. So appreciate it, Katie Pavlich from townhall.com.